want to start tonight with something that's been happening to me for about 3 years now, and I still don't have an answer for it. There's a dream, the same dream, not always identical, but the same shape, the same feeling, the same ending every single time. I'm in a hotel hallway, not a specific hotel I've ever been to, but it's got that eerie Kubrick level symmetry to it. Red carpet, gold trim on the doors, lights that hum at a frequency that makes your teeth ache. And I know in the dream that I'm looking for my room. I check the key. The number on the key is always different. 734 or 482, or sometimes it's not even digits, it's letters. But I know it's wrong. I know I've been given the wrong room number, so I start walking, and the hallway gets longer, not in a scary way exactly. It's almost procedural, like the hotel is generating itself as I walk down it. Doors I haven't passed yet are still rendering. I can see the texture pop in as I approach. And at some point, and here's where it gets weird, I'll pass a mirror and I look in it and I see myself sleeping. Like I can see myself in bed, in my actual bed at home, except I'm also standing in the hallway looking at myself sleeping. And then I wake up every time, no variation. It's like the dream maxed out its compute budget and just reset. 3 years, same dream. And tonight, I want to talk about why that matters. Because I think dreams aren't what we think they are. I think dreams might be something far more intentional. I think they might be the simulation training you. The standard answer, what neuroscience says. So before I get too weird, let's plant our flag in neuroscience for a second. Because the standard answer is actually pretty interesting on its own. Dreams happen during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. Your eyes are literally darting around under your eyelids. And during REM, your brain is doing a lot of things, consolidating memories, processing emotions, apparently filing away information you've learned throughout the day into long-term storage. The memory consolidation hypothesis is solid science. Lab studies show that people who get good REM sleep perform better on learning tasks. Sleep deprives someone of REM specifically, and their cognitive performance tanks. Your brain is definitely doing something crucial when you dream. There's also the activation synthesis hypothesis, proposed by Hobson and McCarley back in 1977. It's a bit more cynical. The idea is your brainstem is firing off random signals, basically noise. Your cortex, being the narrative hungry thing it is, tries to make sense of that noise. So it stitches together a story, a dream, to explain the random sensory fireworks. It's like your brain is doing improv. Someone throws out random words: hotel, mirror, keys, hallway, and your conscious mind is forced to go yes and build a narrative around it. Except you're not aware you're doing it until you wake up. And then there's threat simulation theory, the idea that dreams are evolutionary training. You're running threat scenarios in your sleep, practicing responses to danger in a safe environment. That's why nightmares exist. Your brain is literally drilling you for survival situations. All of that is true. I'm not saying it isn't, but here's my problem. It doesn't feel like the whole answer. Because threat simulation theory and activation synthesis can explain why you dream, but they don't explain why dreams are so hard to remember. They don't explain the false awakenings. They don't explain the weird meta rules that dreams follow. Let me reframe the whole thing. What if I'm right? What if, hear me out, what if dreams aren't a bug in your neurology? What if they're a feature? Intentional, deliberate. Think about how you train a machine learning model. You don't just feed it data once, you run it through millions of scenarios, millions of variations, checking how it responds. You're trying to optimize the model, make it flexible, make it robust, make it able to handle situations it's never explicitly been trained on. What if your consciousness is a model and dreams are the training loops? Your waking life is maybe 16 hours a day, right? But you're asleep for 8. And during roughly 2 of those 8 hours, you're in REM sleep, you're dreaming. That's a massive amount of your cognitive runtime dedicated to what? Random images and narrative nonsense? Or what if it's not random? What if it's targeted? What if the simulation, going back to episode 2, where we talked about this whole thing being a simulation, what if the simulation is running personalized training scenarios for you, tailored to your specific psychology, your specific weaknesses, your specific growth vectors? The threat simulation theory starts to make more sense from this angle. You're being trained. The simulation is throwing scenarios at you, seeing how you respond, refining its model of you, teaching you to handle things better. And the beautiful part, you're completely unaware it's happening. That's efficiency. That's elegant. And look, I've had that hotel hallway dream 3,000 plus times. Rough math. That's 3,000 times the simulation has run a specific scenario on me, checking my response, learning how I handle ambiguity, learning how I react to self-duplication, to the strange moment where I see myself from the outside. That's data. That's training. Back in episode 5, we talked about the idea that you could hack the simulation. That lucid dreaming might be like debug access. You realize you're in a simulation and you start poking at the edges, trying to break the rules. And I think that's more true than I even realized when I recorded that episode. Lucid dreaming is wild. People who learn to do it report things like you can't read words in dreams. Try it. In a lucid dream, if you look at a clock, the numbers keep changing. If you look at a sentence, the words shift and morph. But in lucid dreams, some people report that they can suddenly read just fine, like they've enabled a feature that's normally disabled. Or think about the logic. Dream logic is weird, right? You accept things that would immediately break your suspension of disbelief if you were awake. Your dead grandmother is also somehow your high school math teacher. You're underwater, but you're also breathing fine. You're simultaneously terrified and completely calm about obviously impossible things. That's rendering optimization. Your dream engine isn't spending compute on logical coherence. It's spending it on emotional texture, on sensory detail, on narrative momentum. It's rendering a low fidelity environment, and your brain is filling in the gaps. But the moment you become lucid, you're essentially putting the system into debug mode, and suddenly the rules start to matter. You can read, gravity works. The world becomes more stable because you're now running a higher fidelity simulation on yourself. You're taxing the system, which is maybe why lucid dreams are so hard to maintain. The system doesn't like being hacked. The throughput requirement gets too high. The fidelity needs to match your conscious expectation. And somewhere around 2 to 5 minutes in, most people crash back into regular dreaming or just wake up. Have you ever had a false awakening? Where you think you've woken up, but you haven't? You're still dreaming? It feels completely real. You're in your bed. The light is right. The temperature is right. Everything checks out. And then something breaks the illusion. Your alarm goes off, but it's backwards. Your hand has too many fingers. The ceiling is suddenly plaid. And you wake up again. Except this time you're really awake. Except, are you? I've had experiences where I've had nested false awakenings. I've woken up 4 times in a row, each time absolutely convinced it was real, each time finding some small glitch that tipped me off. And then I actually woke up. This is the rabbit hole stuff. This is where the simulation hypothesis stops being a fun thought experiment and becomes genuinely unsettling. Because false awakenings suggest a couple of things. One, your brain is rendering multiple layers of reality simultaneously with decreasing fidelity as you go deeper. Your dream of waking up is less detailed than the waking reality you're still in, but not by much. Not by enough that you immediately notice. Two, the simulation has validation checks. Something in your brain is still running coherence checks even when you're not conscious. And when those checks fail hard enough, it bumps you up a level. It generates the next layer of awakening, which, if we're in a simulation ourselves, how many layers do we have? How many times do we need to wake up before we're actually awake? Here's something I've never really talked about on the show. I've had dreams where things happen and then I realize I've dreamed them before. Same conversation, same setting, same outcome, and it happens days or weeks later. I'm not claiming I'm psychic. I'm not saying I can see the future. I'm smart enough to know that pattern matching and false memory are real things. But what if dreams aren't actually predicting the future? What if they're prefiguring it? Think about it in terms of the simulation's logic. You're running training scenarios. You're doing threat simulation. You're consolidating memories and optimizing your decision making. So naturally, the simulation would want to test how you handle situations before they actually happen, right? It could theoretically simulate forward. Run a prediction model of what's likely to happen to you based on your current trajectory and decision patterns. Generate a training scenario based on that prediction. Let you practice handling that situation. So when you have the dream, you're being pre-trained. You're learning the emotional and psychological landscape of an encounter before you have it. And then when the actual encounter happens, you feel like you've lived it before because you have in the simulation. It's not precognition, it's preemptive training. And that would explain why some dreams feel like they're showing you something important. Because they are. They're showing you something the simulation thinks you need to be ready for. Okay, here's the thing that actually convinced me there's something non standard happening with dreams. You know how dreams evaporate? You wake up, and for maybe 2 minutes, the dream is crystal clear. You could narrate every detail, but then it's gone. By the time you've checked your phone, brushed your teeth, gotten coffee, most of it is just absent. You remember the vibe, maybe a couple of images, but the narrative is gone. And the standard explanation is that dreams happen in a neurochemical state that doesn't encode well to long-term memory. You need norepinephrine for that, and your norepinephrine is basically offline during REM sleep, so dreams just fade. But what if it's not a side effect? What if it's a feature? What if the dreams are intentionally wiped? Think about the training data angle. You don't want the AI model to consciously know it's being trained, You don't want it questioning the scenarios. You want them to feel real, to respond authentically, and then to forget them. Because if you remembered every training scenario, you'd start to anticipate them. You'd start to notice the pattern. You'd catch on that you're in a simulation. So the simulation wipes the dreams. You keep the emotional and cognitive learning. That's in your neural pathways, your implicit memory, your decision making infrastructure. But the explicit narrative, the I remember this thing, gets flushed. It's perfect from a design perspective. You're being trained without knowing you're being trained. You're learning without conscious access to your own curriculum, which is, if I'm being honest, kind of horrifying when you think about it. I want to throw myself a curveball here because I've been building this neat narrative, and narratives are dangerous. Narratives make us feel like we've understood something when we haven't. The skeptical take is this: Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually right, and the simplest explanation for dreams is still they're a side effect of memory consolidation and neural noise processing. Hobson was probably mostly right. Your brain is just doing housekeeping. The reason dreams dissolve is just chemistry. The reason lucid dreams are hard to maintain is because sustaining conscious awareness in a sleep state requires energy your brain hasn't allocated for it. The reason false awakenings happen is because the boundary between waking and dreaming consciousness is actually pretty blurry, and sometimes your brain misfires the transition. And the predictive element? That's just Bayes' theorem at work. Your brain is running probability models all the time, unconsciously. So sometimes you'll dream something that has a decent statistical likelihood of happening, and then it happens, and you remember the dream because it seemed to predict it. The simulation training hypothesis is elegant. It's appealing. It fits the phenomena, but it's also unfalsifiable. I can't prove it's wrong, but I also can't prove it's right. And that's a problem. So I'm holding both. The neuroscience is real. The simulation hypothesis is speculative, but interesting. One more thing before we close: the default mode network. This is a real thing in neuroscience. When your brain is at rest, when you're not focused on a specific external task, when you're just daydreaming or thinking about your life or existing without direction, your default mode network activates. It's a bunch of interconnected brain regions that light up together: medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate, angular gyrus, parts of the temporal lobe. And the default mode network is associated with self-referential thinking, with narrative, with meaning making. It's the part of your brain that asks, what does this mean for me? It's where your sense of self lives. And here's the interesting part: the default mode network is also active during dreams. It's one of the few networks that remains prominent in REM sleep, which suggests that dreams are doing self modeling. Your brain is updating its model of you. And if consciousness itself, as we talked about in episode 1, is a kind of simulation your brain runs, a rendering of your environment and your place in it, then dreams might be where you're refining that simulation. You're building yourself iteratively every night. So here's where I land on dreams, at least for now. I think they're definitely doing memory consolidation and threat simulation. That's real. But I also think if we're in a simulation, and I'm increasingly convinced we might be, then dreams might be something more. They might be the system training you, running you through scenarios, refining your decision architecture, making you more robust. And the fact that you forget them, the fact that they dissolve, I think that's intentional. I think you're supposed to forget. Because if you knew you were being trained, you'd change how you respond. You'd game the system. And the system needs your authentic response, which means, in a weird way, you're more free in your dreams than you are when you're awake. Because nobody's watching. Nobody that you know of. Just the simulation, quietly running its training loops. And that hotel hallway, that 3-year recurring dream, I'm going to pay closer attention to it. Because if the simulation is trying to teach me something, that's where it's doing it. Next week, we're talking about something I've been chasing for months. Episode 12, The Constant. Why is pi everywhere? Why does the golden ratio show up in nature over and over? What if there's hidden math in the universe? What if the constants we think are arbitrary are actually signatures? Signatures of design, of intention. I'm your host, Travis R. Barlow. This has been The Existence Experiment.